Welcome to the Feds, insiders bringing accountability, integrity, and reform to a broken bureaucracy. At Feds for Freedom, we value constructive dissent and healthy debate. The views and opinions shared in today's episode are those of the speaker alone and do not express the views or opinions of the U.S. government or any other employer.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Feds, Insiders for Accountability. I'm Stephanie Weidel. Before we get into our discussion, please like, comment, subscribe to, and share our podcast channel with a friend. It is through you that we grow and reach more people. Check out our website where you can join us in our mission for accountability and protecting Americans from government overreach at fedsforfreedom.org. This week, October 10th through 11th, is our Health Freedom Summit at Patrick Henry College in Purcellville, Virginia. We are joining forces with Virginia Medical Freedom Alliance and bringing together the military, medical, and federal realms to paint an accurate picture of what government overreach is and will become and what you can do about it. This is a day-and-a-half event that you do not want to miss. So go ahead onto our website to get your tickets at fedsforfreedom.org. Today, I am joined by Sujata Gibson, a New York State lawyer and frequent collaborator with Children's Health Defense. Sujata has fearlessly and successfully litigated many religious and medical freedom cases. Sujata, it's an honor to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
So good to see you too. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. So, Sujata, would you give us a little bit of your history and exactly why you took on medical freedom cases? What put you in that spot?
So I was vaccine injured pretty badly myself by the hepatitis B vaccine and probably by others. After I discovered that one, I went back and saw there were other instances as well of like all these mysterious autoimmune things that come up after each vaccine. And so I I had some background in this, and then honestly, it was a civil rights issue. I was living in New York. This was long before COVID, actually long before we lost our religious exemption in New York for school children. Parents started to come to me because I'm a rights attorney, and they started to say, "Look, I'm getting interrogated, and my religious objections are getting shut down." So I started representing them, and it was really shocking. What was happening to them is literally heresy interrogations. I mean, you would have like the school's lawyer and these parents coming in, talking about their most sacred innermost beliefs and feelings and objections, and just being ridiculed and mocked and asked really inappropriate questions and kind of being caught like, well, do you believe in sunscreen? Okay, gotcha. Then you can't can't object to vaccines if you think you don't want to change God's plan. I mean, it was just so offensive that I felt I had to start speaking up, which was very, very difficult even then. And a lot of people got upset because I am a civil rights lawyer. I fought for a variety of causes, and it was really upsetting for people to hear me say, look, we have to have religious freedom in this world. We can't be interrogating parents. This is unconstitutional. This is not the role of the government. And we have to, be tolerant that people should have basic freedom over what happens to their bodies, especially when we're talking about pharmaceutical products that could cause harm.
Absolutely. Well, recently, this past summer 2025, you had a case of Sarah Doe who was refused entry to the new school year by a public school in New York City because she would not take the second dose of a hepatitis vaccine. Would you tell us about this?
Actually, the third dose.
The third dose.
So I should start by saying Sarah's case, is one of thousands like it in New York. It was not unique. But the facts are shocking here, and they are in many other cases too. But basically, she had no vaccines until she was 11 years old in 2019. New York State repealed the religious exemption option for parents. And so she was forced to get 18 vaccines within basically a month and a half. That's what they forced all of these kids to do. She even delayed a little bit. She had to be out of school homeschooling for a few weeks in the fall of 2019. And her mother begged her, she said she'd quit her job and just homeschool her, but she really wanted to get them, really wanted to play sports. So she took them all. And her health has never been the same. She's almost died multiple times. She's been in and out of the hospital. She has unexplained paralysis periodically. She gets like these rashes, all these autoimmune conditions, blood disorders. She had always wanted to join the military. She just found out she'll never be eligible because of all of her health conditions. So much has been taken from this young woman. And then on top of all of that, um, you know, 8 doctors have certified now that she can't take the only missing vaccine left is the 3rd dose of the hepatitis B series, and they have all certified, like, in her condition, she could die, and it'll definitely confuse what their diagnostic efforts to try to figure out what's going on with her. She even went to a walk-in clinic, like, after the school had denied her first several attempts to submit medical exemptions from doctors, um and they said, "No, she tried to go to a walk-in clinic. Her mom wouldn't take her. But she went, with somebody else over 18 and another family member, and, the walk-in clinic wouldn't vaccinate her because they could tell that she could die from it, and they wrote a note too, and the school didn't even accept that. So, just mountains of evidence, and the school decided to have this inflexible policy, and we won. The really cool part we won the interim decision by the court, but it's good because the court held that we're likely to succeed. But the really cool part of the decision, is that they did this under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and this is a point that I think is very important that I was trying to get across, and that the Americans with Disabilities Act protects kids, and that is, like, the little state regulations that allow this kind of terrible behavior on the part of schools and school principals, cannot, prevail over the ADA. The ADA is the supreme law of the land under federalism, and so this can secure a right for kids not just, in this one school or this one state, but federally for medical exemptions. And another thing the court said is it was the 3rd federal court to say, "We don't think that school principals have the legal right to overrule treating physicians." And so you would think that's, like, basic, but in New York, that has not been the law of the land since 2019. Schools are literally the Department of Health is writing them letters threatening to fine them if they don't overrule treating physicians. They're stridently saying, "Actually, it's just a school principal's determination, and they get final say." Like, so you can have these cases like Sarah Doe's case where 8 physicians say she could die, and the school principal or the school doctor they contract with just says, "Sorry, I don't really see it." And they've never treated her, they've never seen her, they're not qualified.
Well, so let me ask, you all got an injunction, correct? So she can now go to school. This case law has been made. So what is the future for, I guess, laws, exemption laws in that state now in New York?
They're still fighting tooth and nail. I mean, that's one case, that's the 3rd case really that has said this, but there are still calls I'm getting from across the state of people who are having their medical exemptions rejected, by school principals. I just recently met with a family that I'm going to be bringing another lawsuit for. This family, the mother and the children all have a rare genetic disorder for that is pretty serious, and, what they learned over time was it was exacerbated badly by vaccines. Their oldest 2 children actually have now died. Each vaccine they took they got sicker and sicker and lost more and more abilities, like to walk, or at one point, it got so bad for both of the children, they both lost the ability to breathe because their brain could no longer communicate. So and with each vaccine, it got worse to the point where they both died in the last year. And they have 2 younger children who, by the 3rd child, they realized the vaccines, like, they kept getting gaslit, and they'd be like, every time a vaccine would happen for the older 2, they'd be like, "It's getting worse, it's getting worse." And no one would listen to them, but by by the third child, they had like realized this is real. This happened with both of our older children. And so they haven't given the younger two any vaccines. The younger two are healthy. They're 8 and 13 years old. They have not gone down the same path as their siblings, although they do have the same genetic mutation. And so anyway, they're being denied a medical accommodation. They're home trying to homeschool in Queens. They just watched their older siblings die horrific deaths that were very much caused by vaccine injury.
Oh my. And do they have any notes from any doctors? Are there any doctors awake that have made the causation correlation?
Yeah. And there is a lot of actual scientific documentation that so their mutation is in the MTHFR gene, but it's like a really serious one that's that that is well documented that it could be a trigger.
Yes.
But it's not going to be in all the medical journals. It's not going to be listed as the one condition that ACIP lists as an example because there's only like 10 or 15 people in the world who have this mutation, half of them being in this family. So it's not, you're not going to see like this. The whole point, I think the father in this family summed it up beautifully when he said that they're saying it's not in a nationally recognized journal as a listed condition. And he's like, why would it be? Like, there's 15 of us. We are the case study. Like, one family, 4 children, 2 took the vaccines and died, 2 didn't take them and are okay. They all have the same condition. That's the case study with this small a sample size of a population, of a rare mutation. And these rare mutations don't show up in like a study of 160 people, which is often the size of a study to show that a vaccine is safe for kids. They're not even going to show up in a 1,000,000-person study. This is something that really needs to be dealt with and just highlights how reckless and awful New York's policy is.
Absolutely. So it asks the big question, where do individual rights actually stand right now in the United States?
I think one of the most difficult things is that the Supreme Court has not weighed in since 1905. And really even in 1905, they really haven't weighed in on this question of whether we have a right to decide whether to take a vaccine or not. They have said that there's a constitutional right to refuse medicine, and you would think that that naturally would mean we could also have a constitutional right to refuse vaccination, because the language of that case for refusing medicine was that even if it's life-saving medicine, you have a constitutional right. But unfortunately, most of this, the lower federal courts and the appeal courts have not really taken that position. They make this weird vaccine exemption, and we show them all kinds of case law from the Supreme Court saying you're not supposed to make a public health exception, but they keep doing it. And I think until the Supreme Court really directly answers this question of whether we have a fundamental right or not, I think rights are in jeopardy in a major way across the country because you can't it's kind of complicated, but I think that it's very important that they do that. And I think it's very obviously true that we have those rights. And that doesn't mean that there could never be a situation where there's any restrictions on a right. Just because you have a fundamental right doesn't mean the government can't restrict it in some way. It just means that they have to prove they have a good reason that can't be any less invasive. So, it's a high burden of proof. They have to show it was absolutely necessary and there's no, less burdensome way that they could get their needs met. And there have been cases that survive under that standard. But right now, since the Supreme Court hasn't weighed in, the courts say they don't even have to have any reason. If they just say to us, trust me, we have a good reason, that's enough for the court to say, okay, it's your decision. So this, we saw this in COVID and other times where just tremendous overreach with no scientific basis, no reason, no, logical excuse, and yet people's lives were ruined and people died and people were harmed, and
Hmm.
that's where we are.
Well, we know that COVID exposed great federal, also state overreach, but we saw a ton of federal overreach. And a lot of professionals, especially in the legal community, were saying, well, what about states' rights? Why aren't the states asserting their rights at this point? So it showed that in general, states would go along with whatever the federal government would tell them and hand it over more and more power to them. So, what do you make of so many states handing over their power to the federal government? I mean, what's the future of states' rights?
There's sort of this debate right now. I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but there's a big debate in the medical freedom community, for example, about whether there should be any kind of federal action around protecting, say, religious exemptions nationwide. And some people say, no, we think this could infringe on states' rights. It could, endanger those of us who live in states that we feel really comfortable as protecting those rights. And if there's a federal solution, right now there's an administration who's more friendly towards this, but the next administration could come in and make our lives terrible, and we have less control over the federal government. And that's like essentially the argument. But um, I've looked at that because I share that concern for federal action. But what people need to understand about religious protection is it's a one-way ratchet. So you can't go like we have in our federalist system, like we have like certain rules and laws that are governed by the federal government, and the rest is reserved to the states. And one of the things that the federal government has the right and responsibility to protect is freedom of religion. It's a First Amendment to our Constitution. And so it's absolutely appropriate for the federal government to say, okay, states, we are not currently empowered until the Supreme Court tells us there's a constitutional right to not have a vaccine. We're not empowered to tell you what to do with vaccine mandates or policy. That's your business. But when it infringes on constitutionally protected rights that have been, fully vested in us, we do have the right and responsibility to say this is the floor. And so the federal government can and should, I believe, say, whatever you're doing with your vaccine policy, you have to allow for religious exemptions if you have a mandate. They're not saying mandates are okay. They're not saying anything like that. But it can't backfire because the next administration could not legally then come in and say, we want to make sure nobody has a religious exemption, because that would violate the First Amendment and the federal government's responsibility under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, too. So they can't go the other way. So I think I fully support, there's the GRACE Act that has been introduced by Congressman Stubbe and has a lot of support and momentum that would, legislate this and make it a law that you had to have a religious exemption if you have a mandate. It's not saying you have to have a mandate. It's saying you have to have a religious exemption, whatever else you do. There's an executive order that's been, floating around and that people have gotten kind of excited about, have suggested ways to lobby to get that enacted. I think, legislation would be better, but we'll take what we can get. And there are other federal solutions. Um, so I would support that, but I would not support uh, a federal action that just made a law about mandates, because I think it could backfire. Like if there was a federal law or federal, executive orders say that said like you can't have any mandates at all, um, that would be amazing. But then the next administration could come in and say everybody has to have a mandate. It could really go both
Mhm.
ways because there's no, as I said, there's no constitutional role of the federal government in that. So then it just becomes the federal government making policy for all the states in a way that could be used either way. Does that
Well,
make sense?
yeah, that's really interesting and well stated. So are you involved in any other medical freedom cases that could kind of move the ball on that?
I mean, we're always, what I do and what I do with CHD, I work with Children's Health Defense a lot. I'm their lead outside counsel in the New York region. Kind of, I do some cases other places too, but um, every case that we bring is sort of with an eye to impact litigation. Right now, in states like New York, and several others, the goal is just to protect the exemptions right now, at least with the cases, but there's always an eye to, a broader Supreme Court challenge to bodily autonomy. It has to be the right case, and we do bring them and have brought them different times. And one of the things that I have argued, and I've done this in cases with Secretary Kennedy before he went to government as well, we were co-counsel on a number of cases, is cases like Sarah Doe's where especially where a doctor has said a child is at risk of harm or death, are clear-cut violations of several fundamental constitutional rights, not just the right to decide what comes into your body and the right to refuse medicine, but there are rights that have been articulated for parents and how important it is that parents make medical decisions for children, not the state. There are rights that, especially where there's any kind of risk or, risk-benefit analysis, that has to be the parents working with the doctors and ultimately the parents making the decision. There's case after case that has said this. There's also basic rights to not have the state interfere in medical care. That's been well established in a variety of other contexts. So we're always working at advancing that. I'm trying to really solidify this win with the medical exemption. We might have to bring up class action or something else to really nail that down. And there are cases that we have, some of them overlapping, which are also looking at the religious exemption, because I think New York has kind of backed itself into a corner, um, not dealing with the First Amendment on that issue. But at this point, I think recent case law from the Supreme Court and their own recent decisions, I think we have a real chance of getting a win on bringing the religious exemption back.
Before I ask a question regarding the people involved and their thoughts on this, I wanted to ask about the vaccine injured. We have not seen as much successful litigation when it comes to the vaccine injured. So, would you just discuss a little bit what you've been seeing in that realm? Like what has been successful, what just cannot go through? Your thoughts?
Well, the reason you're not seeing it is because of a very sinister legal maneuver that occurred, political maneuver that occurred. The pharmaceutical industry got immunity from lawsuits, and so
Mhm.
you cannot sue them. And
Mhm.
then, down the line, the Supreme Court decided you can't sue the doctors either, even if they misinform you. So the only avenue that the vaccine injured have, and it depends on the vaccine, some you can't even do this with, is to file in vaccine court. And it's kind of a black hole that takes years, and you don't get normal, like you can't get what's called discovery. You can't get information from the companies to show the fraud or anything else, even their own, to show what their data says about vaccine injury. It's very political. So you really don't see the cases because mostly they're thrown out of court. Now, I will say that Ray Flores with CHD recently had a victory, interim victory. Well, it's an ongoing battle. Getting a case reinstated that had been thrown out for a COVID injury. This was a young man who I also met his family. He was forced to take the COVID vaccine to go to college in New York, right near where I live. And the first one hurt him pretty badly. He felt really sick. But as I was, explaining earlier, medical exemptions in New York have become basically non-existent. Even when your siblings die, the Department of Health literally says death of a sibling is not a recognized contraindication to further vaccination. I've
Mm.
read that in their letters back to me. Um, But anyway, so he felt bad. He didn't want to take the second one. He was forced to because it was required in New York State public colleges. And he took the second one and he died pretty horrifically within a very short time after the second dose from heart-related damage that it did to him. He's not the only young man that I've encountered in this situation, but I've seen his death certificate. It shows cause of death was the COVID vaccine. There's no doubt. But the courts held that he wasn't allowed to sue because of the PrEP Act, which gave immunity to the vaccine makers. But now they've reinstated the case, so it has to go before a panel, and we'll see whether he can pierce that because of the fraud.
Yeah. I've just talked with very few newly vaccine injured people in the past. Like they had just had a reaction, and I would have a conversation with them. And the shock when they talk about bringing suit, and I just mentioned you can't they have a liability shield. You can't successfully sue them. I mean, the shock on their faces.
It's shocking and it's horrifying. And it's so sad. So many people have come to me because they know I do this kind of law, including people who, very much spoke out about me for bringing up concerns. And they were gung-ho about vaccination. And then I can't tell you how many people got vaccine injured, came to me and said, okay, well, now I need help. I need to sue it. And I've tried to explain, you can't. There's nothing you can do. You can file this complaint into a black box. And that's pretty much it.
It's a very, very dark spot in
Yeah.
the United States.
And not only can you not sue, it's not like they're trying to get rich. They're just trying to get their medical care covered. Like nobody's
Right.
helping them. Nobody's following up with them to help them get care. And it's really expensive, and they can't go to work anymore because most of them have been so badly hurt that they're disabled.
That's right. This is what React 19 talks about all day long. And they're trying to actually do the work of the United States government of just giving, trying to help them out. Oh, it's just, if no one has heard of React 19, I will put their link in the description below. But let me ask about the people. So like Sarah Doe, why would she still want to go to a school that is mandating she get a shot that is extraordinarily harmful to her? She'd still have to be around the staff of the school. Can you just go over her thinking in all this?
I mean, I think that she's an athlete. She's a remarkable athlete, actually. Before she was kicked out, she had been chosen to be quarterback of the girls' varsity football team at her school. She was told she was a game-changing athlete, and that she'd probably get a full ride to school on her sports. Of course, she lost most of last year, and wasn't able to play, so we'll see how that's going to impact her chances of fulfilling that dream. But that was really important to her. Her friends are important to her. Homeschool doesn't work for everybody. It's not really that. It's not like some one size fits all where you can just tell all these kids, oh, just go homeschool. There were a lot of factors. Kids are social. They want to be around their peers. They want to feel normal, especially a child who's been so badly vaccine injured, has had to deal with so much adversity already. She just wants to be a normal kid, a normal 16-year-old finishing high school, in the place where her mom and grandma and I think even great-grandparents graduated from. And
I can understand
I should also
that.
say there's other kids. Sarah's lucky she doesn't have special education needs, but a lot of families that I've worked with, I mean, a devastating impact is they're not even getting their special education needs met. So they have
That's
all
right.
kinds of services. Their kids often are profoundly disabled and require these services for basic needs, and they're not even getting those met.
That's right. Uh, so I saw in your bio that you are you are at one time a union organizer, and I just wanted to ask what the role of the unions should be, why they exist, and what happened to them along the way, especially during COVID.
I mean, it's a big question. You know, it's so disappointing how the unions, by and large, behaved during COVID. You really did see, at least here in New York, a shocking level of complicity and even participation in wide scale religious discrimination, wide scale disability discrimination, and just violation of contract rights. In New York City, for example, the union was a party to policies which stated on their face that basically Christian Scientists could get religious accommodation and every other religion was categorically excluded. And they participated and signed off on that, and that is not unique. Like this, we're still fighting those legal battles too. But it was shocking and it was ugly. And some unions didn't, and some learned. There are some unions that partway through the process either openly or some of them were, some of the lawyers from some unions were calling me being like, hey, we want to help. Here, let me give you some information, or let me, we're not willing to like come out publicly, but we want to help you fight these legal battles. But most kind of stuck with it and really treated their rank and file pretty badly. But I think I don't know all the factors or the politics that were behind those decisions. But I think some of them are ruining the day now. There's been some real shakeups, especially in New York City union leadership. I think there's been some pretty big ones in the teachers union in New York City and some of the others. Maybe they just didn't realize in the there's probably other things behind it too, but like part of it is they could have just been so swept up in the moment. All of the news media is saying, you should get vaccinated or you're a terrible person. And maybe they didn't realize how many of their members felt that medical freedom is important, or religious freedom is
Hmm.
important, or disability freedom is important, or all of our basic civil rights. And so I think now is the time uh, to really try to change that narrative before we're in another situation like that again.
Okay, so how can freedom activists like Feds for Freedom help make that change? So how can we engage the union so that this doesn't continue to happen? Like, would if we went to them, what would we say to them?
I would I mean, I think individually, people should don't stop talking about it. Talk to your union reps. Talk to, if there's senior leadership, ask them to pass it on. Say what happened during COVID is unacceptable. Our rights were badly violated, especially with the big win you guys just had. Like this is a great opportunity to be like that. But we were right, we won, but it wasn't enough. We need your support next time. We can't let this happen ever again to our members, and we need to make sure you have that commitment. And when you vote, make sure that the people you're voting for have, made some on the record comments that they're willing to stand up for your rights. Um and there may be some organization that could be, among medical freedom advocates in within different unions. I think it's important to organize a little bit, write a joint letter, do some things. But really, the more noise you can make, and it should be friendly and polite, but make sure you know what your union rep stance is. Make sure that they're listening to you, because we don't know when the next alarm bell will ring and everyone will go into panic mode. And we need to make sure our unions are out there fighting for us.
That's absolutely right. I also saw that you have a huge heart for the education of law students. So, what are they not being taught that you have tried to bring to their attention?
I think I taught at Cornell Law School for almost 10 years, and may do so again, but at the moment I'm on a break. But I think the biggest thing that I see in academia right now that I really hope changes is there's sort of a loss of having it be normal to just have debates about subjects. And I really, try to instill in my students like an interest in really hearing the other side of an argument and trying to like really invest yourself in both sides so you can understand both sides. I think every student, I wish, was taught how to make the strongest argument for the other side that is possible, and then be able to counter it with their own. But too often right now, you see, even in academia, where this didn't used to happen as much. It used to be that way. You had to really try to understand like your opponent's strongest argument, and then you try to refute that. But now you see, even sometimes professors or certainly among students, you'll see a tendency to just pick the red herring or the weakest or the wrong version of the counter argument, that's easy to cut down and then just cut that down. And so I don't know. I could go on for a long time,
Mm.
but I really think our society is in danger if we don't learn how to do that. And I think it's on both sides. I'm an independent personally, politically, but I can't stand the sort of like discourse that seems completely divorced from understanding what the other side is even saying at all, on both sides really of the aisle. I wish that would change.
Well, that is an extraordinary point that you've just made. Being able to debate and listen to both sides. I think that was probably Turning Point USA's whole point is
Yeah,
let's talk about this, not just discount what people say because it's not what you want to hear.
right. And you don't have to agree. Like just
Right.
because you understand their best possible argument doesn't mean you agree with it, but it means that you're actually engaging with what the issues are. Because there's
Mhm.
gonna be no issue. I can't think of an issue, maybe there's some out there that's so clearly, divorced from any nuance, but I think every issue has nuance and hurts people in different ways, every political issue. And so to really understand the nuance, is vital, as even if we make a decision as a society on an issue, we have to keep listening to the people that are being harmed in these other nuanced ways and make sure that we can figure out if there's a way to stop that from happening. I mean, that
Mhm.
that used to be civil rights, right? Like that I guess earlier you asked me about like, getting into this work. I think one of the things that's been so shocking for me as a civil rights lawyer is to see how few civil rights lawyers are willing to represent people anymore on different sides of the political aisle. Uh, I mean, I happen to really believe in medical freedom, so, I really believe in it, um, but I feel like even for somebody who's has no concerns about vaccines and thinks they're great, I don't understand why they wouldn't stand up for, you know, the employees who have been excluded because they're Catholic instead of Christian scientists, or, or why would you, force somebody to get something that we know doesn't stop transmission? It's a personal decision. I mean, like, I just don't understand why there are so few. I really miss the old style of civil rights lawyering, which I very much still agree with, which is that I will, bend over backwards trying to fight for somebody I don't, even if I don't believe in them, especially if I don't believe in what they're saying, their right to have free speech, their right to have control over pharmaceutical interventions on their body or religious
Mhm.
freedom. I just don't get it.
It's the entire society that's been polarized.
Yeah.
There was just a TikTok video that came out, or a person that made a post that apparently is a healthcare provider and recently said conservatives better not have a medical emergency. Most of us in healthcare are liberals. This is the entire society is being polarized. It's just absolutely sickening.
And it's beyond polarizing. I mean, it's like not even saying we don't like you. It's saying
That's
I'm
right.
gonna let you die or commit medical malpractice because of your political views. I mean, that's what
That's
that's
right.
saying. Like, it's so violent. I just it's
It
shocking.
it's it's separating yourself from a care of people, but it's just not treating people as humans. Like
Yeah,
we're all just we're all made in the image of God.
right?
We all have a very special place. We're not just mushrooms and we're not just like cats. We're humans.
It's also
And not only
confusing. I mean, I like people who disagree with me. I'm interested in people who have different points of view because it makes for a more, it makes me think. And I can feel like, okay, well, that's something I've never heard. Let me hear why you think it. I might still disagree with them. But it's just become, I mean, no matter how small the issue, it's become like this intolerance of somebody who has any slight difference from your team's point of view. It's
that's right.
it's shocking
And
and it's scary. I mean, my father grew up in India during partition, and he has always been very vigilant in warning us about these sort of divide and conquer maneuvers. And so I've always maybe been like more sensitive to it, but I really feel like we're in that moment. So in partition, in India, the British had been practicing the way that the British kind of control the population was really through this method of divide and conquer. You kind of like create these little divisions between different groups and try to make them feel like one has more rights than the other, and so that they're fighting each other, right? It's an old strategy of the empire. Um, but for the most part, people were getting along. Like in my dad's village in Punjab, there were people there who were Muslim, my dad was Sikh, but there were Muslims there who, he considered brother and sister. Everybody called each other brother and sister, auntie, uncle. They'd lived together peacefully for generations and generations, hundreds of years. And then one day, the British, they got independence. The British left, and it's like a switch was flipped. I don't know precisely how, but millions of people started murdering each other overnight in those small villages right near where my dad lived. And he watched horrors I will not describe here, but that are so shocking and scary. And I'm proud to say that my family, at least, was hiding Muslims that were in his town and getting them to safety. But a lot of people, it was so, so scary. And then the same thing was happening to Sikhs right across the border. They were getting murdered and raped and so forth just for being Sikh in villages where they had been family with these people who were murdering them. So my dad, he renounced um, ever being called any religion. And actually, I grew up around people of all different faiths, like rabbis and Catholic priests and so forth would always be at our house. We were part of this like Center for Religious Tolerance at Cornell. And but he always warned us to be really on the lookout. When we start seeing the mob kind of going for a group, that's when we have to like really stand up because it can happen overnight. And I feel like it's happening right now. I feel like we are being groomed as a nation to find these ridiculous signifiers of which team you're on and really stick to them and it's getting violent. I think we should all be very alarmed and we should all do our part to step in to sort of ameliorate this team sports kind of mentality.
yeah, but how do you do that when you're the group that might be the one targeted? So
I
you're
mean,
kind of like the minority.
the problem though, what I'm seeing, like I very much feel that because I lived I lived through COVID and so did you, and I'm
Right.
seeing how Christians are being attacked, and I'm a Christian, and I'm seeing how, conservative ideas are attacked on campuses. But what I think conservatives need to understand is that liberals also feel in a state of panic and attack, and both sides thinks the other one is totally overblown, and some of it on both sides probably is, and some of it isn't. I think, to be honest, I think both sides are being really targeted and attacked and are in grave danger. And the only way to stop it, because we are the tools of each other's danger. So the only way to stop it is to stop saying like, okay, I believe in the Constitution, but not for the other group, or I believe
Yep.
in this, but not for them. I mean, we have to humanize each other and realize that even the most extreme sort of liberal thinker that's like saying crazy things is a human being. They might be very misled, but they might have some point in there why they feel this way that we should try to understand.
Absolutely. I am 100% with you. I think having gone through COVID, I always talk about a political lens. I think as a nation, we're taught to look at this world, our nation, through a political lens. And that is not true. It's not reality. It's not what we should be doing. And I think COVID really brought me out of that and to start not looking at it like that, but truly through a human lens, which is what we should be doing. I mean, that's how God made us. We're all his, we're all made by him. And I think I I think especially I 100% agree with you. I think we have to surround ourselves with with people who build us up and people who disagree with us because it sharpens us and it
Yeah.
gives us a perspective and it keeps us human, being able to discuss with people instead of immediately reacting. I think that's one of the biggest problems. Everyone's reacting. No one's thinking.
Yeah. Because every topic becomes a whole list of things you assume they then think. So like,
Yes.
it's because there people are looking for identities instead of like looking at each issue on its own. But I also, as a constitutional lawyer, I would say another thing that I think we can do is our Constitution has withstood a lot, um, and is a really brilliant protection we have that is pretty rare and beautiful. Um, and I think that one of the best things all of us can do is know that we're in a time where they're going to use our fears and our triggers to get us to want to get rid of these constitutional protections and to say, oh, we're not going to give them to other groups we don't agree with because they're so dangerous to us. I think we need to wrap ourselves in the Constitution like Odysseus to the mast, as he went by the sirens. And no, like there's going to be something that triggers you to the point where you want to say, like, okay, let's get rid of that protection. But, like, once you get rid of it, you can't get rid of it for one group and not the other. Like, it's gonna be used against you too. We all have to commit to saying free speech is real. It has to be real for everybody. You know, all of these things are not waivable, and we're not gonna waive them no matter what comes at us.
Sujata, you might have already answered my very last question, but I will pose it to you. If the average American citizen could do one thing to combat the corruption that we see in our country today, what would it be?
Look, all of our leaders are corrupt to some degree or another, whether it's to try to play the game so that they can get something good through or because they're just fully have sold their soul. But we have to stop. We have to stop being on these teams and stop thinking of leaders as good guy, bad guy. Like we have to know that like what values we really care about and try seeking out those values and those principles in everything and in every interaction and hold our leaders accountable to those values even if they're on our team. Say like these are the things we care about, remember? Like we have to go back to that,
Yeah.
I think. And treat each other with some degree of dignity even when people are have ideas that are completely foreign to our own.
Absolutely. Well, Sujata, on behalf of Feds for Freedom, I thank you for coming on the podcast today and being such a voice in a very, very dark space. Thank you so much for all the work that you are doing.
Likewise, I'm so impressed with all that you all have done, and really, it's nice to know, people at all levels of government and the world are fighting. I think we're going to make it. I mean, honestly, I think we're going to make it, and this is going to be part of history. The way that our movement will be able to educate and change these kind of draconian laws.
Absolutely. Sujata, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe to, and share our podcasts. I'll see you next week.